Rain soaked through my coat as Uber canceled again. A black sedan pulled up, window rolling down slowly. "Get in," she said. "You'll catch pneumonia out here." I didn't know her name. I got in anyway. 6 months later. She'd change everything I believed about love. Her father was the senator fighting against people like me. One secret would nearly destroy us both. But that rainy night was only the beginning. My name is Maya Whitfield, 29 years old, an emergency room nurse in Seattle who had spent years hiding the truth about who I loved. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside Tacoma, raised by a mother who prayed every Sunday for a husband and grandchildren I never planned to give her. The woman driving introduced herself as Reese Calloway, an architect heading home late from a client dinner downtown. She smelled like rain and cedar, and something about her calm voice made the tightness in my chest ease for the first time in weeks. We talked the entire ride, about nothing important, yet I felt like she was actually listening, really seeing me. When we reached my apartment, she handed me a business card and said, "Call me sometime, if you want." I told myself I wouldn't call. I lied to myself for exactly 3 days. I texted her about a coffee shop near my work, and she showed up 20 minutes early, waiting with 2 cups already. Reese laughed easily, the kind of laugh that made strangers in the shop turn and smile without knowing why. She asked about my job, my family, my scars, and never once flinched at the honest answers I gave her. I asked about her family last, almost as an afterthought, and watched her expression tighten just slightly. "My father's a state senator," she said carefully. "We don't exactly see eye to eye on most things." I didn't press further that day, though something in her tone told me there was more beneath the surface. Over the following weeks, coffee became dinner, and dinner became long walks along the waterfront after her office closed. I hadn't let myself want someone this much since college, and the wanting terrified me more than it thrilled me. The first time she kissed me was outside a jazz bar, rain misting the streetlights orange, and I forgot how to breathe. "Is this okay?" she whispered afterward, and I answered by kissing her again instead of using words. I told her about my last relationship, a woman named Priya who left when I refused to come out to my mother. Reese didn't judge me for that fear. She simply took my hand and said she understood pressure better than most people. She told me about growing up as the only daughter of Senator Calloway, groomed since childhood for a life she never chose. Her mother, Diane, was gentle and warm, nothing like the stern image the senator projected on television every election season. I met Diane for the first time at a small bakery, and she hugged me like she'd known me for years. "Reese doesn't bring people around often," Diane said quietly, squeezing my hand under the table like a secret promise. My best friend Jenna met Reese next, and though she smiled politely, something guarded flickered behind her eyes all evening. "She's out of your league," Jenna joked afterward. Though her tone carried an edge I chose to ignore that night. Weeks passed in a blur of stolen mornings, coffee left on nightstands, and inside jokes only the two of us understood. Reese introduced me to her business partner as someone important, careful not to use the word girlfriend in that boardroom. I noticed the hesitation but said nothing, telling myself patience was a virtue I could afford to practice a little longer. One night she mentioned the Hale Group merger, a partnership her father was pushing between their firm and Derek Hale's family business. "They want me to marry into it eventually," she said flatly, like reciting a fact she'd stopped fighting years ago. I laughed, assuming she was joking, until I saw she wasn't smiling at all when she said those words. "It's not real," she promised, pulling me closer. "Not to me. You're the only real thing I've had in years." I chose to believe her, because believing anything else meant admitting how much I already had to lose. We spent a weekend at a cabin near Mount Rainier, hiking trails until our legs ached and our laughter echoed off the pines. By the fire that night, she told me she loved me, quietly, like she'd been holding the words back for weeks. I said it back before I could second-guess myself, and for the first time in years, saying it felt like relief. We started talking about small futures. A shared apartment. A dog. Quiet Sunday mornings that belonged to no one but us. I began saving photos of us on a hidden folder on my phone, unsure when I'd be ready to show anyone. Reese noticed the hiding and never pushed, though I sometimes caught sadness in the way she looked at my locked screen. At work, a coworker asked if I was seeing anyone, and I found myself saying yes for the first time honestly. I didn't say her name or her pronoun, but the small honesty still felt like stepping onto thinner ice than before. Reese took me to a gallery opening for one of her building designs, introducing me simply as Maya, a close friend. I smiled through the introduction, though something in my chest twisted every time she chose that safer, smaller word. Later that night I asked her when we'd stop being close friends in public and start being something honest. Soon, she said. Though the word felt heavier than a promise, more like an apology dressed up as hope, I let it go because I loved her, and because I understood, better than most, how frightening honesty could be. My mother called that week, asking again if I'd met anyone worth bringing home for Thanksgiving dinner this year. I said I was seeing someone, careful with my pronouns, practicing a script I'd rehearsed 100 times already. A man. I hope, she said lightly, and I let the silence answer instead of correcting her outright. Reese asked how the call went, and I told her the truth, watching her face fall before she covered it. You don't have to fix everyone's comfort but your own, she said, though I could tell she meant it for herself too. We fell into a rhythm anyway. Dinners at her place, mornings at mine. A love quietly built despite the silences around it. Jenna started pulling away slowly, canceling plans, texting less, until I barely noticed the distance growing between us. I assumed she was busy with her new job, never once suspecting jealousy could curdle into something colder underneath. Reese's father made headlines that month, sponsoring a bill limiting protections for LGBT employees across state agencies. I watched Reese read the article in silence, her jaw tight, her coffee going cold in her hands. I can't keep pretending his politics don't touch me, she said. Not when they're aimed at people I love. That was the first time she said the word publicly, even if only to me. In the quiet of her kitchen, I kissed her then, gently, grateful for the courage it took to say something so small and so enormous at once. We started talking seriously about the future, about telling our families, about a life we wouldn't have to whisper about anymore. Reese suggested we attend her father's annual fundraising gala together, as a test. A first public step toward honesty. I agreed. Terrified. Though I told myself facing fear together was better than facing it apart. The way I always had. We picked out our outfits like teenagers before prom, laughing nervously, pretending the stakes weren't as high as they felt. The night before the gala, Reese held my face and said, "Whatever happens, I'm not ashamed of you. Not anymore." I believed her completely, not knowing how quickly that promise would be tested in front of everyone we knew. For the first time, I let myself imagine a future with a name, a wedding, a life built in daylight. I should have known happiness that steady never lasted long without something waiting to break it apart. The gala ballroom glittered with donors and cameras, and Reese introduced me to colleagues as her partner for the very first time. Senator Calloway's smile flickered when he heard the word, though he shook my hand and moved on without a scene. Derek Hale approached later, champagne in hand, congratulating Reese on the merger like our relationship was simply a rumor to ignore. "The engagement announcement goes out next quarter," he said casually, and Reese's whole body went rigid beside me. "What engagement?" asked, my voice quieter than I felt, though panic was already climbing up my throat. Reese pulled me aside, explaining her father had promised Derek's family a symbolic engagement to secure the merger votes. "It's not real," she insisted again, the same words from months before, though now they sounded thinner, more desperate. "Nothing about tonight feels real," I said. stepping back from her outstretched hand under the chandelier's golden light. I left the gala alone, texting no one, walking 3 miles home in heels that blistered my feet with every step. Reese called 11 times that night. I let every single one go to voicemail without listening to a word. The next morning, a photo of us at the gala leaked online, captioned with speculation about the senator's daughter's secret relationship. My phone exploded with messages, including one from my mother that simply read, "Call me now." I drove to Tacoma with my hands shaking on the wheel, rehearsing explanations that dissolved the moment I saw her face. "Is it true?" my mother asked, holding her phone with the article already open, her eyes red from crying. I said yes, finally, after 29 years of almost, and watched her expression crumble into something I couldn't name. "I raised you better than secrets," she said, though I wondered if she meant the secret or the woman inside it. We argued for an hour, old wounds reopening, until she asked me to leave and take time to think. I sat in my car outside her house for 40 minutes, unable to drive, unable to cry, simply hollow and still. Jenna texted that afternoon, "We need to talk," and something in the bluntness made my stomach drop immediately. We met at a diner, and she confessed, almost proudly, that she'd been the one who leaked the gala photo online. "You always got everything," she said bitterly. "The job, the girl, the confidence I never had the courage for." I stared at my former best friend, realizing jealousy had rotted something between us long before I'd noticed the smell. I walked out without finishing my coffee, grief for the friendship mixing strangely with relief that the mystery was solved. Reese showed up at my apartment that evening, eyes swollen, apologizing for the engagement, the leak, the silence at the gala. "I should have told you about Derek months ago," she admitted. "I was scared telling you would make it real." "It was already real," I said. "I just didn't know I was standing in the middle of it." She promised to end the fake engagement immediately, regardless of what it cost the merger or her father's approval. I wanted to believe her, but trust, once cracked, doesn't mend itself simply because someone wants it to. We agreed to take space, a pause neither of us called a breakup, though it felt exactly like one. For 2 weeks I buried myself in hospital shifts, letting exhaustion numb the ache Reese's absence left behind. My mother called once, awkward and stiff, asking if I was eating enough, never mentioning the woman I loved. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't nothing either. And I let myself hold on to that small, imperfect thread. Senator Callaway gave an interview defending his voting record, calling family values the backbone of a stable America. Reese watched it happen from her apartment, according to Diane, refusing to speak to her father for the first time in years. Diane called me directly, something she'd never done before, asking gently if I still loved her daughter despite everything. "More than I know what to do with," I admitted, surprising myself with how easily the honesty came out. "Then don't let pride finish what fear started," Diane said, before hanging up and leaving me staring at my phone. I drove to Reese's building that night, uninvited, heart pounding harder with every floor the elevator climbed toward her. She opened the door before I knocked, like she'd sensed me coming, eyes wide and cautiously hopeful in the hallway light. "I ended it," she said immediately. "The engagement, the merger clause, all of it. This morning. No more hiding behind excuses." "What did your father say?" asked, bracing myself for the answer I already suspected was coming. "That I was choosing a scandal over my family's legacy," she said, "and that he wouldn't fund my firm anymore." I felt the weight of that sacrifice settle over both of us, heavier and more permanent than I'd expected. "Was it worth it?" I asked quietly, needing to hear the answer even though I already believed I knew it. "You're the only legacy I actually want," she said, pulling me inside before either of us could overthink the moment. We spent that night talking, really talking, about fear, About family. About the versions of courage we'd both been avoiding. I told her I needed time before trusting completely again. And she said she'd wait as long as it took. Slowly. Carefully. We started rebuilding. Smaller gestures replacing grand promises. Actions finally outweighing the words we'd both overused. My mother agreed to meet Reese for coffee. As if. Awkward hour that ended without warmth but also without disaster. It was a start. Imperfect and cautious. The kind of start that mattered more because it wasn't easy. Reese's firm struggled without her father's funding, forcing her to consider partnerships that would test her principles all over again. Just as things felt stable, a new complication arrived. One neither of us had seen coming at all. A rival architecture firm offered to buy out Reese's failing company, but only if she signed a strict no-scandal morality clause. The clause explicitly targeted relationships like ours, buried in legal language about maintaining a wholesome public image for investors. Reese refused instantly, though the refusal meant laying off half her staff within the month if funding didn't improve. I offered to talk to my hospital's HR department about a loan, but she refused to let me carry her burden financially. At the hospital, a patient's family complained after seeing me hold Reese's hand in the waiting room during visiting hours. My supervisor called me into her office, citing professionalism concerns, though we both understood the real complaint underneath the words. I fought the write-up through HR, exhausted but unwilling to let quiet prejudice slide unchallenged into my permanent file. Reese sat with me every night that week, holding space for my anger without trying to fix what wasn't hers to fix. Senator Callaway announced his re-election campaign, building the platform heavily around protecting traditional families from what he called cultural decline. Reporters began asking Reese for comments, hoping to expose tension between the senator and his openly involved daughter. She refused every interview request, unwilling to become a headline weapon in either direction of the political battle. Diane, however, quietly resigned from the campaign's fundraising committee, a move that made local papers speculate about trouble at home. I asked Diane why, and she said simply, "I can't smile beside a man who wants my daughter's love treated as a crime." That night, Reese cried for the first time since I'd known her, grieving a father who was choosing votes over her happiness. I held her, not knowing what else to offer besides my presence and the steady certainty that I wasn't leaving. 2 weeks later, Jenna resurfaced, apologizing through a long message, admitting therapy had shown her how deep her jealousy had run. I wasn't ready to forgive her fully, but I read the message twice, allowing a small door to stay unlocked. Reese's firm found a smaller, ethical investor willing to fund her without the morality clause, saving half her remaining staff. It wasn't the rescue she'd hoped for, but it was honest. And honesty had become worth more to her than scale. We celebrated quietly at home. A small dinner. Candles. Relief settling over us like the first warm evening after winter. That same night, my phone rang with news that flipped the celebration instantly into fear. My mother had collapsed at home. I drove to the hospital faster than I'd ever driven. Reese beside me, gripping my hand the entire terrifying ride. My mother had suffered a minor stroke, stable but frightened, gripping my hand tightly when I finally reached her bedside. "Where's your girl?" she asked groggily, and I nearly dropped the water cup I was holding in surprise. Reese stepped forward, introducing herself properly for the first time. No hesitation, no softened language. Simply, "I'm Reese, her partner." My mother studied her for a long moment before saying, "Take care of her better than I ever let myself." It wasn't a full blessing, but it cracked something open between us that hadn't existed in 29 years of my life. During recovery, my mother admitted something I never expected. She'd always suspected, and had quietly attended a support group for parents. I was scared of losing the church, the neighbors, everyone who thought they knew who we were, she confessed, voice small. "I was never scared of losing you," she added. I was scared of losing the life I thought I had to live. I forgave her slowly. In the ordinary, unglamorous way real forgiveness happens. One honest conversation at a time. Reese visited every day during the recovery, bringing flowers, patience, and a steadiness that quietly won my mother over. Meanwhile, Senator Calloway's campaign hit a wall when a former aide leaked emails revealing donor pressure to conceal old scandals. Reporters connected the dots to his estranged daughter's public relationship, framing it as hypocrisy rather than scandal this time. Reese was asked directly on camera outside her office whether her father's politics had damaged their relationship beyond repair. She paused, then said clearly, "My father taught me a lot about legacy. I'm choosing to build a different one." The clip went viral overnight, praised widely for its composure, though the senator's campaign office refused any comment at all. Diane finally left him that week, filing for separation quietly, tired of decades spent shrinking herself for his ambitions. She moved into a small condo near Reese's apartment, and for the first time, mother and daughter grew genuinely close. I watched Reese blossom under her mother's unconditional presence, laughing more easily, carrying herself with less armor than before. Our own relationship deepened through the chaos, tested and strengthened in equal measure by everything we'd survived together. One evening, Reese knelt by the fireplace, not with a ring but with blueprints for a house she wanted us to build. "I want a home neither of us has to hide in," she said. "Designed by us. For us. No compromises." I said yes to the house, and quietly, in my heart, to a future I finally believed I deserved. Construction began that spring, slow and imperfect, much like everything else worth having in both of our lives. Senator Calloway, facing plummeting approval numbers, requested a private meeting with Reese for the first time in over a year. She agreed, cautiously, choosing a public cafe instead of his office, unwilling to be cornered or filmed without control. He looked older than I remembered from the gala, tired in a way politics alone couldn't fully explain. "I lost your mother because I was a coward," he admitted. "I don't want to lose you the same way." Reese didn't forgive him instantly, but she didn't walk away either, leaving the door open just enough for change. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation, but it was a beginning, fragile and uncertain, exactly like most real ones are. Just when life finally felt like it was settling, one final test arrived, quieter but more personal than all the rest. I was offered a head nurse position at a renowned hospital in Chicago, a career leap I'd worked toward for years. The offer meant leaving Seattle, leaving the house under construction, leaving Reese, at least for a long, uncertain while. I didn't tell her immediately, terrified that choosing myself might somehow mean choosing against the life we'd built together. Reese found the acceptance email open on my laptop and confronted me gently, asking why I hadn't said anything sooner. "I was scared you'd think I was choosing my career over us," I admitted, voice breaking on the last word. "I'd never ask you to shrink your dreams," she said. "Not after everything we fought to stop shrinking ourselves." We spent a sleepless night weighing options. Long distance, her firm relocating, video calls replacing dinners we used to share. "What if I came with you?" she asked suddenly, surprising us both with how quickly the idea felt right. Her firm had grown enough to survive remotely, with occasional flights back for major projects and site inspections in Seattle. It wasn't a small decision, uprooting a life, a mother recently reunited, a house still half-built and full of promise. Diane insisted she'd be fine, encouraging Reese to chase whatever life made her daughter genuinely, fully happy for once. My mother, weak but recovering, said something that surprised me more than anything else that entire year. "Don't stay for me," she said. "I spent too long staying for other people. Don't make my mistake twice." Meanwhile, Senator Calloway lost his primary election in a stunning upset, his campaign undone by scandal and shifting public opinion. Days later, he requested an interview, Not to spin the loss, but to say something he claimed he'd owed for years. On live television, he named his daughter directly, admitting his politics had cost him the people he loved most. I was wrong, he said plainly. About the law. About my daughter. About the woman she loves. I'm sorry. Reese watched the interview with tears streaming down her face. Not from vindication, but from the sheer relief of being seen. It didn't erase years of damage, but it was more honesty than she'd ever expected to receive from him. He called her afterward, voice shaking, asking quietly if he could come see the house they were building together. Reese said yes, cautiously, choosing to leave a small door open the way she'd learned from her own healing. We decided together Chicago, but with the house finished first. A foundation literal and symbolic before any big move. Contractors rushed the final details, and within 6 weeks, our home stood complete, bright and entirely, unapologetically ours. We held a small housewarming. Just close people, my mother, Diane, a cautiously invited senator, and even a hesitant, healing Jenna. Watching my mother and the senator stand awkwardly together in our kitchen felt like watching two different kinds of courage. Jenna approached me quietly, apologizing again, and this time I hugged her, choosing forgiveness over the weight of old grudges. Reese pulled me onto the back porch as the sun set, the unfinished garden glowing gold around us. I don't need a ring to know what I want, she said. But I want to ask you something anyway. Move to Chicago with me as my wife, she said. Let's build the next house together. Not just this one. I said yes before she even finished the sentence. Laughter and tears tangled together in the porch light. Our mothers cried from the kitchen window, watching two women who'd fought so hard finally simply be happy. Even the senator, awkward and unpracticed at joy, managed a small, genuine smile through the glass that evening. We married in a small backyard ceremony in Chicago the following spring. No cameras. No politics. Only people who mattered. My mother walked me partway down the aisle, her cane tapping softly, pride replacing years of quiet fear on her face. Diane stood beside Reese, radiant, finally free from a marriage that had cost her decades of her own voice. Senator Calloway sat in the second row, no longer campaigning for anything except a second chance with his daughter. Jenna caught the bouquet, laughing so hard she nearly dropped it. Old wounds finally softened into something like friendship. Standing there, vows exchanged, I realized the rainy night I almost missed my ride had led me exactly here. Every hard choice, every fear, every twist I never saw coming had built the unshakable love now standing beside me. I used to think love this honest only existed in stories, until I stopped hiding and let mine become real. Some nights I still remember the rain, and how one small kindness from a stranger became my entire life. Fendi.